So the question is, what do you do in the face of the fact that there is this two possibilities available for people's way of life? The kind that stays on the land and is certain and has landmarks and is relatively secure and comfortable, and the kind of person who wants to be out on the sea where there is no foothold, there is no bottom, and things are tough and and risky and not comfortable. And how do you deal with it? Well, there are lots of different ways of dealing with it that Melville considers. The one worst way to deal with it, I think he would say, is to try to understand completely the meaning of it all. Not just that that's a very hard job and that you may not be able to complete it. That's not it's just that there isn't any meaning of it all. It's at the bottom, you'll see it for him, sometimes he calls it a chaos. But whatever it is, he says there can't be anything complete. He says that about the Higgly-Piggly discussion at the Cetology chapter. They can't get clear about what the whale is because the whale is intrinsically indeterminate. And we're going to go, that's for next time. Stories about how he talks about the whale as something that you cannot get clear about. But you can't get clear about the sea either. So one attitude toward the sea is you try to get clear, you believe that you could grasp it, and that's the job of philosophy, from his point of view anyway. And philosophers, ever since the beginning in Plato, thought they could have a complete and consistent understanding of the universe, where it came from, what it was made of, what people are up to in it, and so forth. And sometimes I use the term, I think I've used it here, ontotheology. That's a Heidegger term. That means trying to figure out whatever it is that is the basic mode of being. That's the onto. And then think of that basic mode of being as God. Then you get ontotheology. And that's the thing which wants to get the meaning of it all. That gets you at its best to monolithic monotheism, which is what we've just been in, Dante. And that's one of the things you should get out of reading Dante is what it's like to have a view that claims to know absolutely all the meaning of everything. What everything is good for, what its purpose is, where it fits in the universe, what the universe is made out of, and so forth and so forth. Dante, thanks to St. Thomas, who thanks to Aristotle, supposedly know it all. Aristotle, remember, is the one who knows, according in the medieval references to him. So, and another version of it is, a funny version of it is, the Narcissus' relation to water. He also tries to grasp the ungraspable, and in doing it, tumbles into the water and dies. I mean, that's just a statement of, there's something dangerously wrong about the attempt to get this total and complete understanding. Keep your eyes open. Every once in a while, there's some new way that he has of describing the incompleteness and the indeterminateness. I've only just picked out the ones from where we are near the beginning of the book. So now I have to find it. Oh yeah, here it is. Bottom of 15, the chapter looming. So how many have the little version? I'm beginning to think I really ought to refer to it, although I'm against people having. No, you're on your own. If I think of it, I will, and I'll say it, and here it's right in front of me, so I will. Chapter 1, looming, and it's the end of the second page of it in my version. And so he's asking, it's interesting here. You always see something new. I thought he didn't remember. I think I even said last time, I'm not sure, that he never even graduated from college. He doesn't know much about the Greeks. He always talks about Jove when he and when he talks about the Greek, what he's really talking about is the Greek gods, but he's using the Roman name for them. And I decided he probably doesn't even know about the Homeric way of referring to them. But I just saw at the bottom of page 15 in my version that he says, why did the Greeks give it, that is, the sea, a separate deity and own brother of Jove? Oh, isn't that interesting? He's still not saying Zeus, but he does know that it's Greek, and it's Greek, and he knows that the god of the sea, I think he probably thinks it's, what is the name of the god of the sea? Not Poseidon. What? Oh, Neptune, right, Neptune. Okay, yeah, but anyway, what he's thinking is always really about the Homeric Greeks. I'll read you a passage later because it's way back toward the end of the book, but he's still always talking in terms of Jove. I don't know why, but it doesn't matter as long as you know that it doesn't matter. Okay, so Narcissus just plunges in, and that's at the very bottom of page 15. And still deeper the meaning of that story of Narcissus, who, because he could not grasp the tormenting, mild image he saw in the fountain, plunged into it and was drowned. And he goes right on, it sounds pretty important, but that same image we ourselves see in all rivers and oceans. It's the image of the ungraspable phantom of life, and that's the key to it all. This key just keeps coming back and back and back. There is this sort of temptation, mirage or something, that there ought to be a key to it all. And then people just, throw away their lives trying to find it. Like, from his point of view, as Melville's point of view, they shouldn't be doing that. Before the end of today, we will, I hope, be talking about what they should be doing more completely. But what you shouldn't do is try to grasp completely the meaning of it all. Who's the other main character who wants to, not Narcissus for sure, but who's the one who's trying to grasp once and for all the meaning of it all? You read far enough to know that. I'm going home. This is a very depressing moment. I can't believe it. I mean, I couldn't. Who said that? Who said Ahab and saved me from despair? Okay. But why don't you? How many are reading this book? I mean, it's true that Ahab doesn't sort of come on stage until relatively late, but it's not that late. Let's see, when does Ahab get talked about, his problem? Chapter 28, page 105. I don't understand it. Maybe you just don't have the energy to raise your arms. I think I'll have to assume that. And Melville is very clear that what he's really interested in is going to be always dark and hidden and can never be drawn out into the light. And he says it at the top of 55 in chapter 11, and he says, because no man can ever feel his own identity aright except his eyes be closed. That's just strange. As if darkness were indeed the proper element of our essences. And that's interesting because we've just been reading all this blinding light in the Paradiso, and how light is the very basic essence of us. And for Dante, and that's just as it should be. I mean, Dante thinks he's got the complete story, and that's very beautiful and exciting and meaningful. But if you think you aren't going to get the complete story, that sort of mystery is something ungraspable, the ungraspable phantom of life. But it's the ungraspable everything is at the bottom of everything. That's the ocean again, bottomless, indefinite. This phrase keeps coming back to me, indefinite as God. We may get there. It's something that I think Pip sees, but it's right at the end of the next time's read it. Not that means anything, I realize that now. But I warn you, there's going to be a lot of reading and staying up all night if you don't start reading this now. So anyway, so the dark is what is important to Ishmael, something that is necessarily ungraspable. And we'll come back to it. But I'm going through a list now, just so you can sort of see the outline of this. What do people do with the sea, which is so upsetting to most people, because it's got no landmarks, and it's got a bottom and so forth. One is you try to grasp the meaning of it all by science and philosophy. The next is you try to turn it into the land by technology. And so there's a whole discussion of how the people in Nantucket have put a grid on the world, on the ocean, and turned it into something like the land. I mean, he would be very amused by the GPS. I mean, where you know exactly where you are, on land and on the sea. And he sees that that's the way things are going, and that's what people would like. The people who now get down to the shore and don't dare go any further because they're afraid to go in will just get on their boats and look at their GPS and go wherever they please. He talks about this tendency, this tendency to put order on everything, to turn the sea into the land, is what Nantucket stands for in the book. Nantucket is chapter 14, and it's about how the people do that. It's on page 62, the last paragraph of that chapter, that all these crucial sentences are, that I'm going to read, lots of them. And that's all you need to hear about this just once, and see that it's a temptation that, and something that you can actually make progress with, namely use technology to get rid of the mystery and danger and indefiniteness. So he says, thus these naked Nantucketeers, these sea hermits, issuing from their anthill in the sea, overrun and conquer the watery world like so many Alexanders. And then a little further down, 2/3 of this terraquacious globe are the Nantucketers, for the sea is his. He owns it. And then skipping down some more, he goes down to the sea in ships, to and fro, plowing it as his own special plantation. There is his home, there lies his business. And he thinks how different that is from the people who live at sea. Then he talks about that. He lives at sea, this is the end of the chapter, as chamois hunters climbing the Alps. For years he knows not the land, so that when he comes to it, at last it smells like another world, more strange than the moon. Who's this? Wait a minute. There is no home there. He goes down to the sea in ships, there's no home there. There's his business. So he stays on the ships, and when I read this last, I thought, that's interesting. He's like Odysseus. He likes to see and smell and live in new worlds. But who is this? It smells like another world. He's been away up in the mountains, but it's still the land. More strangely than the moon would be to an earthman. I like that. Melville has this ability to sort of picture these very strange things, that there's a way of being an earthman. That's very new. And there's a place later where he talks about this frigate boat, this frigate Earth. He talks about the Earth as a kind of space vehicle. So he's got a picture of technology that's very advanced. But he isn't terribly anti-technological. He's just reporting on it, that the Nantucketers are the ones who take over and make the sea into something like that land. And now, suppose I ask you, and where do you suppose Ahab is from? This should be a no-brainer. Of course, from Nantucket, because Ahab is trying to impose his order on the world and get an answer about the meaning of the life by confronting, in an insane way, by trying to confront Moby Dick eyeball to eyeball. I can't tell you much about the ending, but I can tell you this much. He gets that chance, and it's pretty exciting. And then when you read that, you may know something more about the meaning of everything. So we've got that. And I say 94 we have to look at. Why do we have to look at 94? Okay, yes, well, that's the transition to Bulkington. That's fine. So one is to try to get everything under control, get a grasp on it, and get it clear. Having two branches in it in the outline. Philosophy does it sort of the thinking, and technology, which are the Nantucketers, do it by actually imposing order on everything. But then there's a whole other way of relating to the sea, and that is to make groundlessness your way of life. In an interesting way, in 1850, Melville is such a genius. He invents Nietzsche, who's going to come along a generation later, and he already has his idea of what Nietzsche called the overman or the superman, this higher form of human being that lives on the sea, loves it that there are no horizons, and so forth. And in this book, that's Bulkington. We mentioned that already last time, and I almost got finished with Bulkington, but we have to put it in where it belongs. So you affirm the total difference between the land and the sea. You accept groundlessness, and you avoid the temptations offered by comfort and security and general landness. And now comes the interesting move. I mean, you can't really do this well until you can play Melville off against Nietzsche, because they are so deep and so similar in some way and so basically different in another. I'll read you later a passage from Nietzsche on polytheism, and you can answer for yourself whether he's got it right or wrong. That's a good paper topic, by the way. A very good one, as long as I shut up about it, which I will do. Okay, so you accept groundlessness if you're of this kind of, I call this heroic nihilism, or you could call it existentialism. It's Nietzschean, whatever. And according to Nietzsche, a person, and this is now where Nietzsche and Melville deviate. I've already got to give away some of it, but not on polytheism. But they deviate on how to relate to the sea in totally 180-degree difference. So Nietzsche says it's wonderful at sea, there are no horizons, you can go and go and go in all directions, and so forth and so forth, and you should rejoice in this newfound freedom. That's what the overman, what's he also call him, the Uberman, no, but he has another name for him too. The free spirit. It's better to call it right here the free spirit. But that the free spirit is rejoicing, really happy in the fact that finally God is dead, and the Dante vision has collapsed, and he's out on the ocean all on his own, and enjoying all the different perspectives that you can have on things, and Melville invents that kind of person, and he makes him extremely attractive. This is what I don't want to go over it again because we did it last time, but I don't think I had the page numbers, did I? I talked about it? I think not. We had so little time. So he's just so attractive. You get him on 24 and 25, I hope. Some days I'm going to find things. Yes, at the top of 25, which is chapter 5, about this guy, Ishmael says, I thought he must be one of those mountaineers from the Allegheny Ridge in Virginia. When the revel of his companions had mounted to its height, this man slipped away unobserved. Bulkington, Bulkington, where's Bulkington? They shouted, and then they dart out looking for him. They all think he's wonderful. And now we have to find out what became of him. Let me see. That's 24. It's just that I was going to read the bottom of 24 and sort of skipped it. He had a sober face at the last paragraph on 24 in here. And he was so good looking. He stood full 6 feet high with noble shoulders and a chest like a cofferdam. And I've seldom seen such brawn in a man. His face was deeply brown and burnt, making his white teeth dazzling by contrast. And now comes the important part. And in the deep shadows of his lives floated some reminiscences that did not seem to give him much joy. That's the beginning of Nietzsche's, of Melville's response to the joy of the overman. but now I really have to find out where I am. So, and how does he live? What's his relation to the ocean? Now we go to page 94, I hope. At any moment, I may discover that my pages don't connect with this, but so far so good. Okay, now we got it to 94, chapter 3, the lee shore. This more about Balkington, and what happens next? He gets on the Pequod, and they sail out to sea, and who should be at the helm steering the ship but Balkington? And that's amazing, since Balkington just came back the night before from 4 years on the ocean, and everybody's celebrating that they have warm food and comfortable beds and so forth, and he's already off to sea again. And now that's why we hear on the bottom of 94, the land seems scorching to his feet. And then what I just said, 4 lines from the bottom, in the port is safety, comfort, hearthstone, supper, warm blankets, friends, and all that's kind to our mortalities. But in that gale, the port, the land, if there is a gale on the ocean, which there often is, then the port, the land, and are the ship's directest jeopardy. She must fly full all hospitality. One touch of land, if it but graze the keel, would make her shudder through and through, and so forth. So he has to press himself to stay out. One more paragraph, or maybe 2, top of 85. Know ye now, Balkington, glimpses do you see of that mortal, intolerable truth, that all deep, earnest thinking is the intrepid effort of the soul to keep the open independence of her sea, while the wildest winds of heaven and earth conspire to cast her on the treacherous, slavish shore. We already had on the see this. Okay, we had already written on the blackboard that there was this heroic aspect of the sea and the slavishness of the land. Now, okay, it's like button my shirt.
Maybe. You have to kind of talk down into it if you can a little
Okay.
bit. Yeah.
Well, when I'm doing this, I do that by necessity. Maybe you can fix it so when, okay? Great. Where were we? Oh, yeah, the last comments about him, which are come as a surprise. Now, it sounds like Melville has sort of got inside this Nietzschean perspective. The land is really finally dangerous to a really deep person who wants to be out at sea, because that's where you're free, that's where you can think new thoughts and so forth. And the ending paragraph is amazing. But he wants to say, avoid the slavish shore, okay. But in landlessness alone resides highest truth. Shoreless, indefinite as God. There, I knew I'd seen it lately. So better is it to perish in that howling infinite than be ingloriously dashed upon the lee, even if that were safe. So then I have to explain something. And lo and behold, though he was steering the ship, and I, unless I've missed it, never see what happens. We don't see what happens to him, but he's gone. But from there on in, I don't remember the moment, do you? When he discovers that Balkington is gone, he's just gone. And that shows up in the next sentence. Take heart, O Balkington. Bear thee grimly, demigod. Up from the spray of thy ocean perishing, there's the clue, straight up leaps thy apotheosis. That's pure Nietzsche. I mean, he says, in effect, that Balkington, except for the grimly, that's the big difference between them. But let's leave out that a minute. So they become demigods. That's their apotheosis. That means they become gods, because they become able to live in this way that is not sort of slavish and cringing like all the rest of the humans. But whereas Nietzsche thinks that that's joyful. One of his books is The Joyful Wisdom, or sometimes translated The Gay Science, which we read some of in Philosophy 7. And it's full of joyfulness. But you saw that he had this dark look a bit, Balkington. Now we see that he's grim, and what's the moral of this? And he disappears. The moral of this is Melville invents what ought to be a possible way of life in the face of the fact that 2/3 of the world is the sea, and the sea is, as we've bottomless, dangerous, all that. And this is what it would be to be courageously and facing this and enjoying this fact and staying on the ocean. But Melville doesn't think that that's realistic. He thinks that if you try to be a heroic nihilist, you will find that it's unlivable. And that's his comment on it. So remember last time, I think, though I begin to wonder, everything seems always on top of everything else. We did last time talk about Kierkegaard and Mappel, didn't we? Or did we? That's what I thought. Who? Yeah, good. Okay, so now we've got the sort of two existentialist positions mapped out by Ishmael and dumped. Mappel gives this great Kierkegaardian sermon that you've got to be committed to something all your life. Remember now? Does that sound familiar? That Jonah had a calling and he refused it, and so the whale swallowed him, and only when he accepted his calling to preach the truth in Nineveh and made his whole life, gave his life that meaning, then the whale spit him out, and he presumably lived happily ever after. This is to say, Kierkegaard's the one who says, following Luther, I think I'm saying things I said before, but it won't hurt. When Luther says, "Here I stand, I can do no other," when he stands up to the Pope and the Church. There's a whole tradition going back to Jesus of being committed to somebody or something in such a way that your whole identity depends on it. There's Dante and Beatrice, for instance. I mean, and that kind of commitment is the highest thing you can do, and Jesus invented it, or didn't really think about it. He just lived it, but by living it, he gave the world a new mood, and he gave the world a new goal, namely having, and he turns up with Beatrice and Dante and ladies and knights, and that's behind it. Anyway, that whole picture, which is very attractive in Kierkegaard. Have we written Kierkegaard on the board ever? So, yeah? Okay, good. Somebody knows. Anyway, the two big existentialist views that you can have in the face of the indefiniteness of everything that you wish was definite is the two existentialist views. Otherwise, you can be technological, you can be scientific, but if you want to, and turn the ocean into the land, but if you want to really face up to the ocean and do what human beings do in the face of the ocean, there are two possibilities. You just stay in the howling gale of the infinite. That is, you live a life in which there's no grounding, and you just go from dangerous encounter to other dangerous encounters. Or you make we could say eternal commitment, but if you meant by that, a commitment that lasts your whole life to one particular something. And Melville doesn't like either one. That's the bottom line. He invents them, and he gets rid of Balkington after one chapter. And what has happened with Mappel? Well, Queequeg walks out on it, and Ishmael just drops it. Even though Mappel gave a terrific Kierkegaardian sermon, nobody in this book cares. So, obviously, there's a third something, at least a third something that Melville wants to bring in. And I got a name for it, but the name isn't what's important. It's what kind of way of life it is. The name for it is polytheism. He wants to bring back Homeric polytheism in a way that is adapted to 1850 in the West. And that's neither the Nietzschean or the Kierkegaardian solution. Now I've got to see where I am. I just said for Balkington, I said here, and I'll read it because it's sort of summary of something. So the people who live on the ocean, there is no hierarchy, just compare to Dante. There's no hierarchy, no center, no God, no meaning, and so forth. That's just exactly Dantean monotheism. I'll read it again. So for Dante, after all, there is the hierarchy of everything. The God's the center of everything, everything has meaning because God created it, and it's got a specific meaning that God gave it, and that's the land in its extremist form. Okay, now, I think, yes, I will. If we get a lot of other things covered, I may come back to Ishmael's relation to the painting that he sees as he goes into the Spouter Inn, about which he says lots of funny and interesting things. And should I do it? You're nodding to encourage me, it looks like. Okay, well, somebody has an opinion, and so I better think about that. Okay, I'll do it in somewhat, because now that I know where you guys are, I feel sorry about that, but I can't help it. I might as well talk about things that you probably have read. I'm afraid to ask if you know what the Spouter Inn is or why Ishmael is in it. But let's go on. Anyway, so here we go. It's the first version of the indefiniteness of God, because you've got to equate God with the sperm whale. They've got something very, very important in common, and they get very tightly identified later. But I'm not going to talk about that yet today. So now we're going to talk about the encounter with the indefinite, and which is the dark, the mysterious, and in philosophy jargon, the unrepresentable. You can't describe it, you can't make a picture of it, and so forth. It's got to stay in the background to be the basis of what everybody is doing in the foreground. They can't pay attention to it, but it's their sort of, as I sometimes say, their customs, their practices, what they've been brought up in, what they don't even know that they are always doing, and which they take in a way for granted. So now we're going to hear about that, the first version of it. And that's going to prepare you. I mean, when I've put in another piece. So you've got to have a story about the sperm whale, which I'm going to start now and tell you more next time. And you've got to have, what's the thing I want the other thing? Oh, and the whiteness of Moby Dick. Today I want to talk about the whiteness. I think that's the hardest thing in the book, unfortunately, but it's got to be talked about, and so I'll try to make it as clear as I can. Anyway, but it helps make it clear to start with the picture that he sees in the Spouter Inn. I just want to see where Okay, yeah. Now, so here we go. As Ishmael approaches the Spouter Inn, which is where he's going to spend the night, the narrator shifts from I to us to you, and that's sort of interesting. I mean, that's sort of a technique, I think, for involving us, for letting, this is going to be important on 21, chapter 3, the Spouter Inn. So he says that you find yourself in a low entry. I'm beginning the chapter. And then a little further down, on one side hung a very large oil painting, thoroughly besmoked and in every way defaced in the unequal crosslights and so forth. And then a little further down, such unaccountable mass of shades and shadows that it fits. At first you almost thought some ambitious young artist in the time of the New England hags had endeavored to delineate chaos bewitched. And in a way, that's sort of what it is, really, I think, a picture of something like that. Toward the bottom of the page, he says, a boggy, soggy, squinchy picture truly, enough to drive a nervous man distracted. I hesitate to ask, but can you imagine who the nervous man is, who can't stand it, that the world isn't clear and the meanings aren't clear and everything? Who? It must be Ahab. Yes, it's Ahab, and the test is, keep your eyes open for it. I couldn't just open to it. There's one place where he's talking to the carpenter, and the carpenter, he puts his hand in the carpenter's vice and starts to turn it, and the carpenter says, beware, that's a dangerous gripping. It has a dangerous grip. And Ahab says, I like to get a clear grip. I like something with a clear grip in this world. And that's just another way of saying it. But the picture is the opposite. You can't get a clear grip on it. So, and then I just always sort of want to call your attention to Melville's weird, wonderful sense of humor. He starts trying to figure out what it means at the bottom of page 21, what it's a picture of. He says, ever and anon a bright but alas deceptive idea would dart you through. It's the Black Sea in a midnight gale. It's the unnatural combat of the four primal elements. It's a blasted heath. It's a Hyperborean winter scene. And then my favorite one, it's the breakup of the ice-bound stream of time. Can you imagine somebody who could think of a picture of that? But then he says, finally he thinks that it has a faint resemblance to a gigantic fish, even the great Leviathan himself. And that's a final theory of my own, partly based on the opinion of many aged persons and so forth. Then he tells you the picture is a whale jumping over a ship and getting impaled on the mast and so forth. But I think it's very important to realize that he doesn't say, now we know for sure what it is. It's still supposed to be so boggy and squishy and indefinite that he just says that's his theory of what it is. And presumably other people could have other theories. And that gets him to something about something that's unsaid. Why do I go? Let's go look at 180. There's really nothing unsaid on 180. So let's just look on this one for fun. Maybe you guys who got this one will now triumph. No, I don't think that is it either. What the line I was going to read is the beginning of chapter 42. What the white whale was to Ahab has been hinted. What at times he was to me remains unsaid. But we haven't gotten to the white whale yet. We're just talking about that picture, which he thinks might be a sperm whale. Oh, look, 181, it says. This book is getting ahead. What is there? Oh, yeah, that's important. That's the beginning of chapter 42. I'm going over here to 42, even though I didn't mark it. Okay, 42. I just read that what the white whale was. It remains what the white whale was to Ahab has been hinted, and there's lots about what the white whale was to Ahab until he finally gets him. And at times what he was to me as yet unsaid. But he's going to try to explain the whiteness, and that's what he says at the end of the first main paragraph on chapter 42, page 157. But how can I help to explain myself here, and yet in some dim, random way explain myself? I must, else all these chapters might be naught. I read that because what he means by the whiteness of the whale is so hard to understand that you have to just keep trying, because he says you just won't understand the book unless you can understand what it is, what is so frightening, what is so important about the fact that Moby Dick, who isn't really the sort of god, or is white, which has nothing to do, of course, with white, black, or any color of people, but it's very important that whiteness is a very special color or non-color, and very upsetting. And so we have to go into it here. Let's go into it. So all these chapters would be naught. And so he starts enumerating all the associations with whiteness, white elephants, white priest's robe, and so forth. And he goes on like that and for a while. But that's just warm-up. Finally, he gets to the fact at the top of 161 in this. Now this is a long chapter, so you're going to be lost if you don't have this book. I can't help with that. So yet while these terrors, he's talking about all the terrible things that whiteness is associated with, like death. especially. Yet these terrors seize us. Let us add that even the king of terrors, when personified by the evangelist, rides on a pallid horse. That's the death thing. The death isn't especially important. Something much worse is tied up in the whiteness of the whale. And so now we're going to keep looking. He tries to pin down what he calls the panic that he thinks is associated with whiteness. Or something, it's more extreme than even fear. Fear is what threatens human beings in some kind of their well-being in some way or another, something that's going to hurt them. But this isn't fear. This is some kind of nameless dread that the whiteness causes. And then he talks about that, getting beyond the fearful. On page top of 164, it's the last page of chapter 42. Lots goes on in there. Lots. And I'm not sure I do understand it, but I have to try so you could bounce off of my trials and fix them if you can. So we're going to get to what's really beyond the fearful. And that's in the form of questions. Yeah, there it is. At the top, I'm going to read a lot of that paragraph. Is it that by its indefiniteness, remember the indefiniteness of God, it's always coming around. And that doesn't mean you just can't see it clearly. That's what it looked like maybe in the spouter end. But there's something indefinite about whiteness. Even when you see it, you don't see it. Okay, by its indefiniteness, it shadows forth the heartless voids and immensities of the universe. That means, in effect, that everything, just a bunch of planets running around and blowing up and so forth, that don't have any significance for human beings, and we're used to that now, blasé. That really frightened people like Pascal in the 1700s, and Melville's trying to make it as frightening as he can. The heartless voids and immensities of the universe stabs us from behind with the thought of annihilation when beholding the white depths of the Milky Way. That's one question. These are all questions. Or is it that an essence of whiteness is not so much a color as an invisible absence of color, and at the same time the concrete of all colors? For it is for these reasons that there is such a dumb blankness full of meaning. That, to me, in my interpretation, that's the crucial phrase. There's something about whiteness which is a dumb blankness full of meaning. And if you could figure that out, what he means by that, and I think we can by the end of the day, you would have his non-Christian, non-existentialist, is it polytheist? Yes, I guess it is. Anyway, his own special view is tied in with this dumb blankness full of meaning. And it's like colorless all color of atheism from which we shrink. So there's some way that the meaninglessness and the indefiniteness of everything is very upsetting. Now, I think we can skip a lot. Another way to put it is that nature, which looks sort of beautiful and sort of meaningful, is really just underneath more indefiniteness and so forth. He says nature paints like a harlot whose allurements cover nothing but the charnel house within. So all of this is supposed to be a story about the way whiteness reveals the emptiness and nothingness of everything. And let's see if, and I don't know the next one, but when we proceed further and consider that the mystical cosmetic, which produces every one of her hues, the great principle of light forever remains white or colorless in itself, as if operating without medium upon matter. It is as if operating with medium upon matter, it would touch all objects, even tulips and roses, with its own blank tinge. So that's a pretty hard one. But that says, in effect, that white light, it lights up everything, but but it has to do it. No, I don't know what that means. I give up. If I know, I'll let you know. But now, finally, pondering all this, the palsied universe. I think that means pale, but I looked up, that word doesn't exist. But anyway, I'm going to say the pale universe lies before us as a leper, and like willful travelers in Lapland who refuse to wear colored and coloring glasses upon their eyes, so the wretched infidel gazes himself blind at the monumental white shroud that wraps all the prospect around him. And of these things the albino whale was the symbol. Wonder ye not at the fiery hunt. Wow, boy, is that complicated. And he's obviously, I think the dumb blankness is full of meaning. I think that white can be both an example of this indefinite chaos, this nature which has no meaning, and the universe which has no meaning. But then how come the whiteness is full of meaning? That's the part we don't understand yet. Well, that's because there's one piece missing, and that's where are we? One way to think about it is that if you put all the various perspectives that you can have on reality together, they would cancel each other out. It's in very much code, but it's a criticism of people who say that you should add up all these perspectives on the world, and then you'll get some holistic picture of the sacred and the meaningfulness of it. How many have heard of Houston Smith, who was a sort of former teacher? But he believes, he's like lots of people, I think, believe this, that you can sort of put together these various sacred experiences that you can have, and that it's like a puzzle in which they all eventually fit together in one unified meaning. And and Melville is saying there are all these different color perspectives you can have on the white whale, but if you put them all together, they don't add up to a meaning. And it's very sensible what he says. They would cancel each other out. There is all sorts of different sacreds, and they certainly not are all compatible. And then if you try to so when you try to add them all up, and they cancel each other out, it's as if you put all these different meanings in, and the dumb blankness came out. Now what should you do instead of trying to go around adding up the perspectives? You see, it's complicated because Ishmael wants to go around and experience all the different sacreds he can. But he doesn't have the idea that you can put them together in one unified picture. That's what I'm calling the polytheism. You have to just accept the different gods which stand for different things and don't all get along together any more than Aphrodite gets along with Ares or any of them get along with Poseidon and so forth. So you've got all these meanings. You add them up, you get whiteness. Oh, and all the meanings are like colors. He's sort of in this metaphor of color, which is sort of doing the job for him if you could only understand it. It's very important that all these different colored lights add up to whiteness if you try to add them up. So what could you do? Well, I'll tell you in my terms first. Well, you could break them down so that, like a rainbow, the whiteness which had all these different colors in it in such a way that they added up to blankness would instead add up to a whole spectrum of meaningfulness, or a whole spectrum of colors. And it's in there. All you have to do is get in the right relation to it. If you get into this summing it all up into some unity, you produce this nihilism where they cancel each other out and you see that everything is meaningless. But if you could get into an attunement to some particular color in some particular situation, say the erotic situation with Aphrodite, and at that point, don't try to add in Poseidon and Hephaestus and Ares and so forth, but just resonate to that. And then later, if you have to fight, resonate to aggressiveness in Ares and don't forget the erotic atmosphere for a while. If you could keep if you could keep open to each of these colors when it was appropriate, then the whiteness of Moby Dick would turn into a rainbow, and you could pick out and respond to whichever aspect of the rainbow you wanted to. Okay, that is so weird that I definitely happy your hand is went up. What do you have to say? Well, you're the person I can't hear. Can you hear her? Okay, they're going to translate you. Go ahead.
So I'm just curious, what is the prism?
Well, that's a perfectly good question, and I understood it too. Oh, it's okay. So I don't know what. I mean, we have to try to figure it out. What would it be? It would be letting yourself be attuned to various perspectives on reality, and that's all. I mean, there won't really be a prism. There will be some attitude on your part, which will, any more than there are really colors. But in so far as you can describe it as a rainbow, you can say that the white whale is like a rainbow, and that the white whale, if you added it all up, would be white, all the colors up. But if you now, that's where the prism now comes in. But if you resolved it by being attuned, by having the skill of being attuned to various sort of wavelengths, that you could resolve it into a rainbow. And then, instead of letting it all collapse back together into whiteness, you respond to it rainbow-wise, so to speak. That's his complicated story of how to get meaning out of blankness. And he's making, as you say, and rightly, this prism story do a lot of work there. I mean, it's a metaphor, but it's a metaphor for something that I don't know what else to, well, not almost don't know what else to describe it as. And yet, the idea is, and the amazing thing is, I got this figured out once, and then I discovered I'm right. I'll show you where in the book it's there. There is absolutely clearly in the book a story about how all these various perspectives, if you add them up, cancel each other out. But if you get in the right attunement to them, you can pick them out and enjoy them one at a time. And the amazing way he does it, and I'm going to have to jump ahead of your reading now, but it doesn't really make a big difference because it's a self-contained story. How would he explain this if he had to find another metaphor besides white light and tell you the same story again, where it wouldn't be prisms anymore, but you'd still have the same structure, that if you tried to put it all together, it would cancel out, but if you can be attuned to it bit by bit, it can be meaningful. It's fun to think of it. I don't know when it hit him, and I don't know whether he even had the vocabulary we have. What if you tried to do it with white noise instead of the whiteness of the whale? And you could discover the same structure in the white noise that you can discover in the white whale. Yeah, you're all looking, and I'm happy you are. What could that mean? Okay, well, we're going to get into it. Uh-oh. Okay, I'm too loud or too soft?
Too soft.
Oh, okay, well, you're right. The podcast people won't be happy. Okay, so now let's see where we are. I'm going to go to the white noise in a second, but I have to catch up. I was so pleased when, as you will see, when this structure, which is so weird in the white light story, comes so simply in the white noise story. Oh, so it has no meaning, and then we get 188. I hope it's in one of these books. I've got too many books. Nope, it's not in there. Let's try this one. So, okay, but I know where it is. We got to go to a chapter. The chapter is something like the temple in the Arcadies. Help me look for that. Oh, here it is. The bower in the Arsacides. It's chapter 102. So the whole sound thing gets done in chapter 102, 358. I don't even dare ask how many have got up to 358. It wouldn't be fair. I haven't told you what. Have I written down how far? No, I haven't. I wanted you to read up to 334 today, and that. But now I want you to read up to chapter. The last thing you need to read for I'm going to talk about next time are chapters 93 and 94, which gets you up to 337. So I'm going to write that on the board. This is just sheer illusion, but read up to, what did I say, 337? Okay. Those are two things. It's important, even if you don't get there, jump there, because it's those two chapters which are very, very important for understanding the whole book and don't really need the rest of the book. So do jump to, let me make sure, the castaway and the squeeze of the hand. We may not get to 94, but 93 is very important. It's more about perspectives. Oh, and as long as we're cheating now and reading things before we get to them, let's see where, then another crucial chapter, which we're not going to get to next time, but the time after, is 99. Really, those three, particularly 93 and 99, are very important clues. But now, let's look at the power in the RS. For a dyslexic, that word's impossible. I won't even try. So, okay, let's see now. The bottom, he's taken into a temple. And this is at the bottom of page 359 in the fat book. And what did he find there? Well, they had found a whale stripped of its enfoldings of flesh, and the bones dried in the sun, and they dragged it up a hill and made it into a temple. So here's a variation on Moby Dick, which goes from the living animal to the skeleton, but it's going to have the same structure, and it's going to go from the whiteness to white noise, and that also has the same structure. So there, and now we're going to read a lot. So starting on 360. It was a wondrous sight. The wood was green as moss of the icy glen. The trees stood high and haughty. Where are we? Feeling their living sap. The industrious earth beneath was a weaver's loom. Keep your eye on that. The weaver's loom is as near as anything ever gets in this book as to a description of God. That's the structure of meaning, is weaving. And you'll see more about it later. Right here it goes by very fast. But it's here. I'm going to skip now from the weaver's loom, with a gorgeous carpet on it, whereof the ground vine tendrils form the warp and woof, and the living flowers the figures. For me, I'm going to just say this so it's on tape. It's interesting that when you see this version of the weaver God, the weaver God has got the warp and woof both. When you keep your eye open for when you finally see the weaver God again, it has only got the warp and not the woof. That is, so when if you have a carpet, you've got to have the things going this way and things going this way, or it'll fall apart into something like chaos. Well, that's funny. In the temple, the weaving is complete, but when he finally sees the whole thing, the weaving is always, of course, unfinished, indefinite, and so forth. I have to think about that. That was a note to me. You don't have to think about it. Okay. Then we're going to skip, though, now to the middle of 360. The weaver God, he weaves, and by that weaving he is deafened. We're getting into the white noise. And he hears no mortal voice. And by that humming, we too, who look on the loom, are deafened. And only when we escape it shall we hear the 1,000 voices that speak through it. So there's a lot of noise made by the weaving that holds the universe together. And what do you do? Well, if you get up close to it, it is white noise. You are deafened by it. But if you get the right distance away from it, then it's like the rainbow. It's a whole bunch of different voices, and you can tune in on one or another. And you don't have any funny dealings with a prism. But he's telling the same story again. So no mortal voice and we too who look upon the loom are deafened. And only when we escape it shall we hear the 1,000 voices that speak through it. That's what I'm talking about now. And that's it. I mean, that's really the move. And I don't know, but I marked this, so I'll read the beginning of the next paragraph. Now amid the green, life-restless loom of the circadian wood, the great white worshipped skeleton, see, it's still white, it's still the white whale in a way, lay lounging, a gigantic idler, yet as the ever-woven verdant warp and woof intermixed and hummed around him, the mighty idler seemed the cunning weaver. So it's really all about why would weaving be a sensible way to talk about God, where God now, this is complicated. Oh my God. Yeah, okay. So there are two different aspects to God. We've been sort of off on the notion of God like a person, like Jesus walking around, or Beatrice saving Dante. And that is one aspect of God, that it's being a kind of special individual something or other in the world that gives people meaning, that saves them, and so forth. But that's God the Son. But there's always, I mention it every once in a while, starting already with Aeschylus, where he refers to God I know not what. Isn't that the phrase? Or is that God I know not something? Aeschylus thinks that it's something you can't represent. There's also God as the unrepresentable basis of everything. We'll get to that more next time, but I have to talk about it now for some reason. I'm trying to figure out why. Because when he talks about the whale, or even the skeleton of the whale, as weaving everything, that's not God incarnate like the Son, that is S-O-N, not like Jesus or whatever individual, or Beatrice, whatever individual has whatever sort of meaning-giving, saving power. There's what is the God the Father on this story? It's, remember now, and this is hard, and you don't have to know this, but it's something that is really part of the course. You can't help but have to have some story about how all the various ways of acting that people have, all their practices, all the language, the way of doing things, the way they stand with respect to each other, the way, what they like and don't like, and find and they get joy, or how they get bliss, or whatever. All that stays in the background. You don't have to think about it. In fact, if you did think about it, you'd get sort of paralyzed. So, but that background of all the stuff that and how did you get it? Well, you just got socialized into it by your family and your peers, and they got socialized into it way back to the beginning, and I don't know how it started, but it's been around for hundreds of thousands of years, some background. And the background isn't just staying the same, it's historical. It's getting a different understanding of what it is to be as time goes on. And we've got now this modern understanding, all sort of unfortunately messed up on the story I'm telling by Descartes and Kant, where we get finally to this, we become God, we egos, we give meaning to everything. That's woven into our practices. But what's important is that there is this background, and it's absolutely essential because it's what gives meaning to everything, and it's indefinite. That's the indefinite is God, but it's not really chaos. He only says in passing once that I know of that it's chaos. Nietzsche says it's chaos. If for Melville, it's woven. That's what he's just saying here. And that's a metaphor for describing the whole intermixed combination of language and practices and religious beliefs and secular beliefs that go together to make up our understanding, that's the background, and that's the weaving. And now, back to the point. And if you try to pay attention to it, and get up close to it, and really see it, put all the colors together, you get blankness, dumb blankness and whiteness. If you try really to hear it, you get white noise, which is a kind of blankness. So what do? Well, you pick out in the rainbow, which is the metaphor for the white whale, you pick out some particular color and resonate to it, and then that's your God for a while. That's like Aphrodite in the erotic situation, or Ares in the war situation. And as long as you get the right distance, I'm going to switch to the white noise story, then that becomes clear and meaningful to you. And it comes out from the background and is your, God-man kind of thing. Some particular something on the background of what you can't think about. And when you try, it all becomes white noise or white color, and it loses its meaningfulness. What you have to do is keep both the background of color or noise, but be sensitive to, at any given time, whatever color or whatever note of music is happening. That is mind-bogglingly hard, and I'm sorry about that. But it's so interesting that there has to be, I'll say it one more time, some source of meaning. That's sort of what we can call God or God the Father. Some source of meaning which is always unrepresentable. And when you try to represent it, it goes blank. That's the story again about the whiteness. If you try to put all the colors together, you get whiteness. But if you leave it in the background, then you can pick out some particular meaningful situation, meaningful person, like Beatrice or whatever, in the foreground against that background. And you can think about what you pick out, the color or the sound, and you won't get whiteness if you don't try to put it all together in one unified, complete picture, because there is no unified, complete picture. There is this funny mixture of what has to stay indefinite in the background so that meaning can show up in the foreground. Okay, I've said it over and over, but I can't do any better. But I'd love to have comments. Yeah, Tyler. Interesting. I don't know. That's a good question. So, Father Mapple, Kierkegaard said, yes, you've got to pick out, so to speak, one color and one sound and just stick to it. Then you wouldn't be deafened, according to this picture, and it would be a unified, it would be a lasting meaning. It would be a kind of what I've called multiple monotheism for Kierkegaard. That is, each person has their constant way of looking at things, perspective, which colors their whole world. The answer is in the chapter on the doubloon. It's what Pip knows. And what it amounts to is that if you could pick out a perspective or a color or a sound and know that it was a perspective or a color or a sound, you could keep it for your whole life. You wouldn't have to have more than one. And that's, so Melville isn't saying, it's interesting, with this story, I was sort of building a kind of polytheism into it. That's very interesting what Tyler's saying. He's saying, yes, there's a multiplicity of perspectives. Remember, that means colors, that means sound in the background. And you can home in on, I was thinking of this one and then that one. That's how I was describing it. I think that's Homeric polytheism. That's what Melville really wants. But it looks like his metaphors of getting the hearer understanding. Well, no, you notice he talks about once you get far enough away from the center of the noise, you hear the voices in it, not just one. And I think when you get away from the whiteness of the whale, you see a rainbow, not just one. Maybe I'm the one who gave it this serialness. Of course, your question is still good. Why doesn't Melville believe that there's just one? I don't know. It looks like it's Melville thinks it's a kind of richer reality, I think. Now, why is that? Let me think about that. There's no doubt that built into those metaphors is the sense that it's nice to hear all the voices. It's a good thing, and not just one. I don't know why. It's good to see the rainbow, not just one color at a time, but the whole rainbow. I don't know why. You could see the rainbow, but one color at a time, but still several colors, and you could hear the voices. Several voices. Why not? I mean, or why? I mean, so you got two proposals. A kind of polytheist, okay, I'll say in a second, a kind of polytheist proposal which says, see all the different colors in the world as a rainbow and one at a time, because if you try to see them all at once, you don't get a rainbow, you get whiteness. Or it could say, no, it's okay as long as you see them one at a time. You don't get whiteness. What you shouldn't do is get one and stick to it all the time. That's the sort of mono answer. And then that's what's missing. That's what Tyler is saying. Why shouldn't you get one and stick to it? What you shouldn't do is try to add them all up, that's sure. But you could have a series of them. That would be the Kierkegaard thing. A series of commitments, a series of identities. Not exactly Kierkegaard. I don't know who. Anyway, somebody. And, okay, I'm going to let you talk. I need help. Yeah.
I was just thinking, since apparently it's kind of impossible for the human being to see it all at once because of the whiteness, maybe what Kierkegaard was insinuating was that maybe we should just conform to the illusion of being happy with just one reality while lowering that.
Lowering our conceit of attainable felicity.
Like reciting our.
Yeah. Well, do you realize you realize that that's Melville? The mouthful of words I just gave out is Melville's name for it. That you have to lower your conceit of attainable felicity and learn to love food and love people love sexuality and love philosophy and so forth. You can have all them. What you can't have is some one answer to the whole thing, and that is Melville's.
Maybe it's better to live with the illusion of having just one at a time, even though it's not perfect.
Okay, I think you're making this up on your own right now, because you're absolutely in tune with the text. I mean, what Melville says, I'll show you where we should look, and then we have to stop, but that's what I said we were going to read next time, which is 93 and 94. That's chapter 94, the squeeze of the hand. That's where he talks about lowering your conceit of attainable felicity, and he lists a whole bunch of wonderful things that you can appreciate and so forth. If you can bring that together with the story about the rainbow and the story about the sound, you'd have you'd have an answer to Tyler, and we'd be right at the heart of understanding the book, which very few people ever have done. So do for sure read 94, even if you have to skip a lot. Okay, we have to stop.